With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. And this is a fun exploration for me. Robin's here with me. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Lovey.
I'm here too, in case you listeners were wondering.
SJ is like one of those crew members who just becomes part of the ship, you know.
It's the one that goes underneath the water. Yeah,
that's right.
And he's got like a shell sticking out of his face.
Yeah, Davy Jones' locker. And he's just stuck to the ship. So whenever we podcast, the SJ's here. He's stuck to the podcast ship.
Well, I still haven't shown you how to operate the equipment either,
I know. I'm trying to avoid that.
Keep you on.
I'm trying to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. We had the opportunity to have a good friend of mine, Keith Daniel. We did the In Living Color.
Yeah, Kingdom in Living Color.
Kingdom in Living Color series. And Keith was a founder for Zoweh back in 2006 when we first got our papers together, paperwork and all that stuff. Keith was part of the founding team. And it led to a couple of other conversations about the founding of Zoweh and how this all started. So we thought for Exploring More today, Robin and I would just come in. SJ's got some questions for us that we would explore Zoweh.
Yeah.
How was this thing founded, right? How did it come to be? And so we thought we'd tell a little bit of the story of...
Yeah, we realized we hadn't done that, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of come up a little bit here and there through the course of the things that we talk about, right? But we haven't been really intentional about kind of sharing some of those stories.
And being the major ministry that we are in the world, you bring the founders in. So this is Founders Day.
That's right.
Let's call it Founders Day.
That's right.
So for those who are curious and want to hear what God did on our journey, that's what this podcast is about. How did we step into Zoweh? How did God invite us into that? So we're going to explore that today.
Yeah. So let's start right there. So we've shared quite a bit actually, about your background in ministry. So maybe starting there, where you started, as we've often said, as full-time professional Christians.
Yes.
And then the transition, what was the catalyst that moved you from where you might have started in ministry into founding a ministry like Zoweh?
Well, we both had college encounters with Campus Crusade. I through Athletes in Action, you through the campus ministry at the University of North Carolina. We were participants. We just were students experiencing kind of the discipleship, I would say, of Campus Crusade.
Yeah, and where were you?
Central Oklahoma.
Penitentiary and university, so you call it.
That's where I played where I played college basketball and did my time.
That's right.
And so one summer I was invited to go overseas with Athletes in Action on one of their touring teams, and that's where I was really brought into a world that I really didn't know, because Central Oklahoma was a smaller Division II school. We didn't have Campus Crusade, but that experience introduced me to Campus Crusade, Athletes in Action, and especially overseas. So loved it, came back, got invited to play on the full-time team. Back then, 1989, Athletes in Action had a team that toured through the country and played overseas. And so I did that full-time with them as one of their players for a year or so. And then, that was 88. So in 89, really loved it. I mean, I got to keep playing. I loved the whole Christian and ministry side of it. I was very much pro-God kid, pro-God basketball guy. Keeping the opportunity to play was really great. And doing evangelism, discipleship, all of that worked for me. So then they moved where we were based in Southern California. My first year, they moved the team to the glamorous city of Xenia, Ohio, just north of Cincinnati and kind of the Dayton area, but Cincinnati basically. And so in that transition, the players that were on the team, we were kind of on a different status. They actually asked some of us to change our status and join the staff of Campus Crusade with Athletes in Action basketball. So I think 5 of us did that, and a couple guys kind of stayed in the contract player situation And that's what shipped me off to a summer in Colorado at Colorado State University. You've been there, SJ, at Fort Collins, where Campus Crusade 4 years has had their summer staff training.
Yeah, every other year.
Every other year. And so...
Before you move on to that story, though, clarifying question for you, Michael. So did AIA become part of Campus Crusade at some point?
Campus Crusade had about 32, 33 divisions, 33 ministries under its hub. Campus ministry being the largest and the lion's share for sure.
Right.
Family Life, Priority Associates, Here's Life Inner City, Prison, the Executive Ministry, Jesus Film,
all sorts of
all kinds of stuff that Crusade said yes to, and they started all kinds of lanes.
Right.
But when I was headed to Fort Collins, that's when Robin in my life started to line up in a collision course. So I'll let her share a little bit about how she came into Campus Crusade, and then we'll transition to Zoweh.
Yeah, that's great. Because I don't know that I've heard much about your life at UNC, go Tar Heels, by the way, and what that was like for you. So yeah, I'd love to hear some of that.
It all started when I was a little girl back in San Diego, California. No, I actually did start in San Diego, California. That's where I was born, but I won't go back that far. But my mom and dad both came to know Jesus a week before I was born. My dad ended up going to seminary, became a pastor. So I was raised in a Christian bubble. My parents loved me, loved Jesus, loved my sister. It wasn't perfect, but I had a good experience with their faith became my faith in a way. And then when I went to college, when I went to UNC at Chapel Hill, I just decided, you know what? I know I want to end up there. I know I want to walk with God. I know that I want to hang on to my roots. And I knew and had tasted the goodness of God, his trueness and his faithfulness. But I wanted to kind of do my own thing for a few years in college. I didn't know anybody who didn't know Jesus. I was sheltered. So at UNC, I decided to do the college thing and joined a sorority and just kind of did that whole scene for 3 years. And then I met a woman who was on staff with Cru, who really loved me well and pursued me, even though I was not really wanting to have anything to do with her. It was truly the love of Christ in her that just compelled me. She invited me on a summer project, a Cru summer project, the summer after my junior year. So right before my senior year, and it happened to be to Hawaii. And it was an incredible summer, not just because it was in Hawaii, because that was amazing, but I saw other girls and guys who loved Jesus, were on fire for Jesus, and who I got to know and saw them headed in a direction that I had never really experienced before. We studied the book of Philippians. God's word really came alive for me. So I was really experiencing some things for the first time in my Christian journey. Came back my senior year. This woman who I had met on campus, who was with Cru, a single girl named Dana Salibi, who to this day we're friends. She let me live with her because the house I was going to live in my senior year was being worked on. I didn't have a place to live for a couple months. So I lived with Dana. That was completely the hand of God. And I got to watch her day in and day out and what she did. And she loved Jesus, walked with Jesus, and she poured into girls' lives and cared for them, loved them. I watched her do this every day, and I thought, that is what I want to do with my life. And I was currently an education major and a minor in English and was going to be a teacher. But I watched Dana and thought, that is what made my heart come alive. Mm-hmm. That is what I want to do. So change of plans as soon as I graduated, finished my student teaching after my senior year, and came on staff with Cru, flew out to Colorado for new staff training. And the very first day we were there, met Michael. The very first day.
It's true.
And I remember being on the plane, I will say this, just the kindness of God and the presence of God, even back when I didn't know a whole lot even about this way of living and intimacy with God. I got on that plane, headed for a place I had no idea. I didn't know a soul. I really didn't know what I was doing. And I remember sitting in that plane. I remember the seat where I was sitting, leaning my head against the window, looking out into space and just saying, okay, Jesus, it's you and me. I want to walk with you in this. I need to know you've got me. It's you and me. And it was just surrender. I trust you that you've got me. That was a sweet moment of really surrendering
A
and trusting.
significant
And
moment.
yeah, a significant moment for me. And then the next day,
We met.
you.
Yeah.
Things got more complicated.
Yeah. That's right.
Because it wasn't just
Smooth
you and
sailing
Jesus anymore.
Yeah. And 17 years later, and 3 little girls, and all those years on crew staff were awesome. I played a couple more seasons.
That was 1989.
Nine.
You went
We got
to,
married in
in
90.
90.
got
Yes,
married in
89 was
at CSU.
came on staff.
Yeah.
And then 90, we got
90 we
married.
got married.
And then
For 3 years you played.
92, we started to have this conversation about a family and maybe where we might fit into the crew family organization next. So we moved in 93, we moved to Duke University, where we became the Athletes in Action campus staff there in May, maybe June. School was finishing, and we were going to start the ministry at Duke. I had a couple guys to contact at Duke because the way it works, the fall's when you do a bunch of team meetings with all the athletes and the different teams on campus. And so that really hadn't happened. But I had a couple contacts, was scheduled to meet with one of the quarterbacks on the football team. And this is back when there's not much going on the cell phone front. I mean, we don't have them yet, believe it or not.
It was a landline.
93, 90.
It
Yeah,
was
man.
93.
Yeah, bag
Yeah.
phones were in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
They
Crazy
were
money.
for the rich
Executives.
executives.
So anyway, we were pregnant with our firstborn, who was Ashley, born in August of 93. That's just how we started. That's how life on campus began, the transition there. We were there about 11 years. And then
Your first appointment on campus was
football
with the
quarterback, yeah.
quarterback, and you didn't show because I went into labor.
yeah. So anyway, that's how that went. Stood up my first appointment on campus.
Well, you had a good reason. I mean,
That's right.
Very legitimate reason.
That's
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So we were on Duke's campus for 11 years. But here's where Zoweh really starts to come in. We were meeting with students. We were meeting on campus. We were a part of an area team. We were a part of a regional team. We were a part of a national team. I mean, there was a lot of good years, a lot. Had 2 more daughters, 3 total, 93, 95, and
98.
98.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back, right, that's the hindsight. That's the Kierkegaard quote, life's understood looking backward,
Life
but lived going forward. And,
I don't know the Kierkegaard quote.
but that's it. You were close. And looking back, I just had kind of an ache. You know, we did the 4 pillars talking about life and love and freedom and discovering those things. This was pre-discovering the 4 pillars, you know, that were part of our journey together. Here's what it was like. SJ, I could do my job. I knew what to do on campus, but my heart had begun to drift. So I did what I thought was reasonable. I've told you this. I've talked about theology and the academics. So I signed up for seminary. So I got 3 little girls, been at that point 7, 8 years on campus. So I signed up for seminary.
So this is the way this happens, right? So you feel a little discontented.
Mm-hmm.
Some's not adding up, or that I must need more knowledge.
Yeah.
I must need another level of degree.
So instead of a long vacation or taking a
sabbatical
break
or something, yeah. No, it's fine. It was where you were at the time, and
Yeah.
it made sense to you. I just wanted to make that understood.
And it wasn't so much I need a degree. What I was looking for was I need to not be in charge. I need to sit in a seat and let somebody else do the teaching. Honestly, that was kind of the posture my heart was in. I need to learn more. That made sense to me.
I also remember that the kids that we were meeting with, the athletes, the guys and the girls and the coaches, they were hurting.
Yeah.
And I remember they have these stories of pain and trauma and brokenness that
Yeah.
we all do, but we didn't know how to help them.
Mm.
Just giving Bible verses.
A Bible study didn't
wasn't
sound quite like it was going to
enough.
get it.
So I remember you wanting to get your master's in counseling.
The counseling part,
that was
yeah.
part of it.
That's right.
Mhm.
That was absolutely part of it. Even those years, they were important. They were good. The seminary years were good. I was working on campus. Robin was too. We had our little family. And I'm studying and doing papers and exams and stuff like that. I mean, I was taking a class or 2 a semester, so this was not happening quickly.
Right.
This was, kind of part-time student. And at the same time, I'm sharing and speaking in a part of the Athletes in Action national team, and it was good. But what happened in early 2000 was Wild at Heart came out the year before. I had gotten a hold of it. A friend had passed it along to me. And that's where the very ache that I had that took me to seminary actually started to be massaged and scratched by God through Eldridge and Wild at Heart. And I was very impacted by the book in a variety of ways, particularly theologically, honestly. There were things he was talking about that I was ready for, or ripe, or however you want to say it. Warfare particularly, battle to fight, adventure to live, beauty to rescue, core desires of a man's heart. I'd actually had a seminary class on the life and works of C.S. Lewis, and his stuff about desire is very thick. That was a big longing and want and the desires. This quote, I'm going to just give you my paraphrase, that if you find that you have a desire that nothing on earth will fulfill, well, maybe you were made for somewhere else.
Yeah. Maybe earth isn't your home.
Yeah. And so God was meeting me, even though I didn't have the language or even the files or classifications for how he was pursuing me, how he was coming for me. I went out to an Eldridge Wild at Heart boot camp with 4 buddies that had read the book, and let's go. And this was one of the first, this might have been the second boot camp that they offered. And that's when I came home from that kind of eyes wide open, like even trying to tell Robin what happened to me, because what really happened to me out there, becoming a Christian was clearly an encounter with God. You just don't become a believer. You don't become a Christian however long it takes, or whatever intersection you move through. You just don't without encountering God. But then working for him and serving him all those years, maybe it had been some years in between encounters. I wouldn't go that far to say that I wasn't experiencing or encountering God, but serving him and working for him isn't the same as enjoying him.
Mm-hmm. Or being enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And I had plenty of stuff in the way that came with me into that. So really, it was kind of implosion, explosion. I wrote about it in Heart of a Warrior. There's a story about, how do you see me, God? We were invited to take some questions to God. That's just a different category for me at the time than, I want you to go pray for a little while. I probably could have gone and done something with that 20, 30 minutes. But when they said, we want you to go ask God a few questions. Yeah, if you could see SJ's face, the eyebrows went up. Yeah, because you had your first encounters with that when we
knowing your story, I could
like,
see the look on your face while you're there.
Like, what? What do you mean?
How does that even work?
They put the questions up on the PowerPoint and stuff, and 250 guys kind of go out of the room quiet. Could hear a pin drop, code of silence, and I go sit on a rock and say, okay, Jesus, what do you think of me? Who am I to you? And the quick story is, I just have this image of Aragorn in my head. And I really think, okay, concentrate. You're doing this wrong.
Yeah.
I absolutely thought this is not working. And for 20 minutes, I couldn't get that out of my head. And I kind of go back into the room, I think dragging my shoulders down low. Like, gosh, I got nothing. So it still was an impactful weekend in many ways. But I didn't know how to really hear from God. I didn't know how that all worked. I thought you could ask somebody else. God would tell them and they could tell you. Kind of that, like passing notes.
I mean, that's really what the system of Catholicism is all based on, right? Like, I'll talk to the priest talks to God, he comes back and says, here's what God said.
Baptistism is the same thing.
True.
And Presbyterianism is the...
Well, that's true.
There's a lot of that going around.
There is a lot of that.
So a few months later, it's my birthday, and Robin, you can tell the story.
Was it your 40th?
No, I was 38. Yeah.
Let's stop right there with that story, right? And leave that as a cliffhanger. And when we come back from the break, Robin, share a little bit about what those years were like for you, where you were
at that
at.
moment. Yeah. Good idea.
Okay. And what your journey was like up to that moment you decided to give him the gift that was the best gift ever. Okay. We'll be right back.
The Zoweh team invites you to attend the Heart of a Warrior Encounter Weekend this fall at Young Life Trail West in Buena Vista, Colorado. Thursday to Sunday, October 15 to 18, 2020. During the weekend, the team has 3 main objectives. Help a man to get his heart back, teach him how to fight, and show him where the battles are. The kingdom needs more men who know what it is to walk deeply with God and who dare to be dangerous for good. Join the Men of Zoweh by going to zoweh.org/events for more information.
All right, welcome back, listeners. We're in the middle of a story.
We are. But before we finish the story, right, we
Yeah.
want to hear, Robin, Michael shared about this holy discontent, right, that was brewing in him. He decided to go to seminary to try to get that itch scratched. Here comes Wild at Heart and kind of starts to satisfy him there. So he goes to one of the weekends and ends up in this place where he's heading towards his 40th birthday, right? So what was your experiences during that time of your life? Were you on a journey with God? You were largely involved. I know you had 3 little girls running around, and that's a lot for anyone. You need a lot of Jesus there, right?
So much.
Yeah. So where were you at during that time?
Mm-hmm. I was truly overwhelmed by being a young mom of 3 little girls and was in way over my head. The first one, we had this formula that we plugged into and adopted, this way that was a way of raising your children that had this outcome. They were going to be godly children if you do X, Y, and Z all along the way. And our first one just fell into that routine and that way seamlessly. And we thought, this is brilliant material. With our second one, we realized maybe not.
She's not having any of it.
She wasn't having it. It just rocked our world. So I truly can say for, I don't know how many years, 18, 20, I was surviving. I was not doing well. It was hard. And Michael was very alone for the most part in ministry and in pursuing other hearts. I really enjoyed being with the girls on campus, the athletes. I had a couple small groups of some of the girls, the athletes, and then I had a group of some of the women coaches. And I really enjoyed those. But I was very torn. Michael would come off campus, come home, and stay with the girls, and I would run to campus to meet with the girls and the women. So, yeah, it was a blur, and it was a lot. But when I first went to Captivating, after Michael came home and told me
They've got one of these for women.
Yeah. I've told the story many times, but I thought, well, it's a weekend away. It's in beautiful Colorado. Michael's got the girls. Why not?
What could be bad about that?
Right.
Yeah.
And what he had told me about the men's weekend was phenomenal. He loved it, and I trusted him. And he felt pretty confident that I was going to love the weekend. I went, and that shifted everything for both of us.
Yeah, when you think about marriage and kind of the 3-legged race that it is, I wasn't running on ahead, especially when you think about the timing of Robin wasn't far behind when she went out to Colorado from the time I did. So we really were exploring together and yet separate. So John didn't have a whole lot of books, and now, Eldridge has quite a few books, and Stacy's written. So this was even before Captivating was written, when Robin went out to the women's initiative that they had. So I think I was, at the time, it might have been for my 40th birthday, I think maybe Robin asked, what would you like for your birthday? And I think I said, I'd love a sword, or I'd love a replica sword. I'm not sure what
You
kind.
didn't give any details.
Yeah.
You just said a sword.
Yeah, because the swords kind of figure prominently at the weekends, right? I mean, they're
They had them
on
at,
display.
They had them
Right.
at Ransom Hearts events, and we've since had them at ours and stuff. Just symbolizes a lot of things: a passage to manhood, a passage of manhood. Many passages, I think there really are. But it's still, though, I think when I remember that first time with God asking how He saw me, and then having that opportunity to unwrap some presents a few months later.
So when you mentioned a sword,
Yeah.
I had no idea the context. I had no idea the significance, rather, of
Yeah.
the sword at those weekends. I heard the sword and thought, what in the world? So I remember asking God, what kind of sword do I get for Michael? I have no idea. Would you direct me to the sword that his heart needs? I just remember that prayer. I have no idea. And I went on eBay, like any good shopper does, and plugged in sword. And there are a lot of swords on eBay. I remember, oh gosh, what was the one? The Sword of Charlemagne. I'm looking at that. I'm like, no. Looking at all these different swords, I had no idea. But I'm like, Lord, Jesus, lead me to the sword that would resonate with his heart. And for some reason, the Sword of Aragorn. I hadn't heard you talk about Aragorn. I've never watched Lord of the Rings.
Enduril, Flame of the West.
But that was the one.
Mm-hmm.
That was the sword that I bought for Michael,
Yeah.
not knowing.
Yeah.
When it came and I wrapped it up, put a bow on it, I guess is how you wrap a sword, the box of a sword. I remember you unwrapping it and you just started to cry because it was so significant.
It was an immediate taking me back to how he had seen me and what I thought at the time was a distraction.
Yeah.
You know, so I really can't even
Was
take much credit for, it was like swinging with your eyes closed and Jesus threw the ball to hit your bat. You know, it was one of those kind of moments like, wait, that's what that was. Wait, that's how this can work. It was huge, 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 huge. And the character and the journey that Aragorn was on and some of the confusion he was going through. I mean, I just identified with
putting aside his false self.
So much of it I was identifying with. And, you know, if there's listeners out there like, wait a minute, I'm Aragorn or I'm Aragorn. You know, I mean, I get it. There's a lot of us. There's a lot of us out there.
It's a big enough kingdom. You can all be Aragorn.
There's a lot of William Wallaces. There's a lot of there's Maximuses. There's a lot of.
And there are other swords on eBay.
Yeah, there are
Aragorn
plenty still there waiting. But those were some of the real beginnings of this life in the kingdom, and the colors of Christianity began to be reclaimed. I would say they began to grow into something very broader, wider, more significant,
richer, fuller.
And in particular, you know, we really became students of warfare. We became students of the good heart, the redeemed heart. We became students of image bearing.
Learning to hear his voice.
Talking with God, not just to him.
So the gift of the sword was your 40th birthday. What year was that? 2004?
Yes, that's right.
That happens. It's 2004. What's going on in AIA life
and Campus
Crusade and all that? I mean, how's that going at this time, 04, 05?
Yeah. So there was a real crisis for me on staff, and I think Robin's right. She was managing and yet also kind of exploring and coming alive. But together with little ones kind of on campus, I think together we were probably adding up to 60 hours, maybe 70 a week. You know, together, not each 70, but just like she said, I'd come off shift and that would give her the evening. So there was about 3 days a week like that. I'd have a long day. She'd have the evening. And it helped us with effectiveness on campus, and it helped us, you know, connect and reach with a lot of students. But ironically, there was an invitation from the national office to move off campus and move us back to Ohio. And that's when it got a little bit like, we're walking in this. We had some adult friends, you know, people our age that we were sharing this with, taking them, you know, back to some of these events and retreats with Eldridge. The students, the college students, didn't quite have the mileage to kind of get. It wasn't like we had a youth group or a youth ministry, but there was a lot more in that.
I remember, Michael, you sharing with me, honestly, very vulnerably, that you just felt this growing question, like, I wonder what's next. It was like a growing discontent, and that wasn't like you.
Yeah, I loved the AI years.
Yeah,
loved them,
yeah. But again, looking back, can see God's loosening almost of our heart's ties there.
Yeah.
You were kind of, I wonder what's next. We had no idea. We weren't trying to head out for something else.
Yeah, being a bit of a loyalist, as I can be, was I would have just kept trying to work it out with AIA, with Campus Crusade. But SJ, the funny, hard crisis moment was Athletes in Action wanted to move Robin and I back to Ohio to be a part of a national team in the field ministry. And when they offered that, everything in me was, no, that's not a good idea. I really knew what they were inviting me to do and be, and I just couldn't pull a trigger. I even told them, well, let me stay here. And this is long before Zoom and
Skype might have been
and
somewhere on
calls,
the horizon,
you know,
but it was 2000.
I didn't know about it.
Like it was kind of like, how about I fly in for 5 days, because men were starting to commute then. You could work from different places and kind of go to your national offices or corporate headquarters and stuff. So, I could be available to them. I was writing then, I was sharing, teaching then. And so conference speaking, stuff like that within our national team. But I did not want to move to Ohio. And I didn't know where I was supposed to go, but I knew I wasn't supposed to go there.
I knew that too.
Yeah, and we had talked about that.
I remember telling you, yes.
So,
No offense, Ohio listeners.
no.
This wasn't
I
it's the
was
kingdom
raised in
conversation.
Ohio. I
No,
love
yeah.
Columbus.
No, it was more the job, the position,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
post that they were inviting us to. And at the same time, remember, Robin and I are coming alive with more life, more love, more freedom, identity,
Intimacy
image, all
with God.
that stuff is actually happening to us. It was kind of like we had our day job and then we had this moonlighting thing. We had this other job that we really loved. And it was talking with these friends that had gone out to the Colorado conferences, working hard to help engage with Ransom Heart. And they made some room for us. So I had opportunities with the Ransom Heart team. But when it came down to it, Athletes in Action finally pressed in and said, "You need to come." I said, "I don't think this is right for us." And they said, "Well, you can't stay there." So there's some kind of question as to whether I just got fired or I just quit. I don't remember how it all shook out. But it was in that moment, that's when I experienced, Rob, a relief rather than a heavier burden. It was like I had permission to not have to kind of work that stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Robin and I, there was one more stop with Campus Crusade with a good friend of mine, Jay Stott, a founder. So Keith Daniel and then Jay Stott were founders of Zoweh, and that comes a little bit later. But Jay Stott was the director of another initiative with Campus Crusade in the Raleigh-Durham, where we live now, area called Priority Associates, kind of the marketplace ministry, working with businessmen, kind of corporate chaplaincy and women. So we made the transition. Within Crew, we just kind of changed the placard on our door.
I think for 3 years, right?
Two
Two
Yep.
years.
So here's the Zoweh transition in the last minutes we have of this podcast. So a couple quick stories. We're setting at a Campus Crusade conference in 2005. I told you I'm in seminary. I'm going to graduate just not long after that. 2005 summer, we're at staff training. We're sitting with each other in the stands, 6,000 staff there.
Yeah, it's a giant concert, basically.
Think of a college campus's basketball field house. We're in there, Colorado State's basketball arena for concerts and things like you said. So we're sitting there, Campus Crusade, big worship team. I mean, before Hillsong, before Bethel, these guys could rock. They were awesome. Great hymns, great opportunity to worship together, corporate worship. So a speaker comes up and starts to share what he shared, how he shared. It was just pretty condemning, a sin emphasis, cross emphasis. And the problem with you is your hearts are wicked. That's the human condition.
Get your shiz together.
Yeah. It was heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
And we were already probably 1 foot out the door. We were healing up a little bit from being fired or quitting. We still can't figure out which we did. And we looked at each other in the moment.
Both knew at the same moment.
We turned to each other and said, "This is over."
Yep, we both knew in that moment.
So the next dominoes that kind of fell were we arranged to leave staff. We invited all of our financial partners to come and partner with us in a new adventure called Zoweh. How that came about, I was writing a paper in seminary and came across John 10:10, had the Greek lexicon and the Vines and the Strongs open, and here was this word Zoweh, and it just was one of those things that hit me. This is the word for life. It's used sparingly. It's important. I came that you might have Zoweh and have it to the full. I want that. I'm experiencing that. I love that. So we kind of made it look Viking-ish, kind of made it look Middle Ages. We kind of branded it, gave our crest, came on. All that stuff started to unfold.
Yeah, wasn't there something with Braveheart? The
Braveheart heart
that's in there.
So things like that started to happen, SJ. I mean, I love the Braveheart film. I think it's an important film in the masculine journey, in some chapters of the masculine journey. So we had already kind of talked to this friend of ours, this graphic designer who had created the Zoweh logo, this gold arch representing God, protection, provision, our heart's in alignment with it, and this diamond heart. I didn't want an edge to it, the diamond heart. Well, it was a couple months later that I'm looking at a Braveheart poster. I don't even know how, where, or what. Might have been online. And that diamond heart is in the logo. I really got a little panic like, oh my gosh, Randall Wallace, who wrote Braveheart, we might get in trouble. We stole the diamond heart.
Yeah.
We stole the diamond heart.
Right.
But I love the correlation, love the connection with that. And then the other one, I want to read to you what I found. We have a lot of fun arguing, discussing the difference between finding something and it finding us. And this was one of those things. So I'm reading in Mere Christianity. I'm looking for something, maybe the Lord Liar Lunatic quote. And I'm flipping through the book. In Mere Christianity, this comes up. C.S. Lewis talking about two kinds of life. In reality, the difference between biological life and spiritual life is so important that I'm going to give them two distinct names. The biological sort, which comes to us through nature, and which, like everything else in nature, is always tending to run down and decay, so that it can only be kept up by incessant subsidies from nature in the form of air, water, and food, etc. This is bios. The spiritual life, which is in God from all eternity and which made the whole natural universe, is Zoweh. So I'm like, wait a minute. I discovered Zoweh.
Not C.S. Lewis. Who's
Lewis.
this guy?
Yeah. What the heck?
Who's this guy?
Bios has to be sure a certain shadowy or symbolic resemblance to Zoweh, but only the sort of resemblance there is between a photo and a place, or a statue and a man. A man who changed from having bios to having Zoweh would have gone through as big a change as a statue, which changed from being a carved stone to being a real man. Lewis goes on and finishes, and that is precisely what Christianity is about. The world is a great sculptor's shop. We are the statues, and there is a rumor going round the shop that some of us are someday going to come to life. I was like, just no way.
So 30 seconds of no way, and then you must have run into the other room. Robin, read this.
Oh yeah, everybody, right? The good stuff. You want to share the good stuff. So now you also, in this moment, SJ's heard me tell this story at least 20 times from stages and microphones. Now you know the importance of the sculptor's story with the boy.
Oh yeah.
Chipping away everything that's not the line.
Right, sure. Yeah.
All of that's kind of tied into this. So we launch 2005, we start the process, finish in 2006, the paperwork for the nonprofit 501c3.
Get your approval.
It's just Robin and I and some friends. And you know what's cool about Zoweh today? It's Robin and I and a bunch of friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few more papers that had to be filed. There's a few more budget line items.
Mm-hmm.
But oh my gosh, it's just what we get to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we love to do, exploring the kingdom together, sharing the kingdom, our discoveries with other people, and still being customers in the kingdom, learning what the difference is between this physical life, physical realm, and being alive in the spiritual realm. Love what Graham Cook says when he poses the question, I wonder how you're known in heaven.
Mm.
And one of the things that God's up to is revealing who you are on earth as you're known in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that to be inspiring,
I love that.
encouraging. Jesus, where are we going today?
Right.
What are we up to today?
Yeah. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing all that. There's so much goodness behind it, and it's a great reminder for us and for our allies and our friends, and hopefully some of you listeners are being welcomed in and understanding a little bit more what we're about. You know, Michael, as you're talking about the team, you know, one of the things you and I have talked about many, many times is how what we're trying to do, as far as we know, has not been done before. And that's, as an entity, as an organization, as a ministry, Zoweh, we're trying to operate not just as a ministry, not just as an organization, but also as a redemptive community.
Yeah.
And so maybe one time we can talk about what that looks like,
Oh,
you know, because I know so many of
That's
our
a great
listeners,
podcast series, The Redemptive Community.
within the context of your law office, wherever you're working, listeners, you know, can you bring the essences of a redemptive community to your organization? Because we're trying to do it. We don't always do it perfectly, and we're kind of figuring it out as we go along in some degree, but it'd be good to share about that. That'd be fun.
I remember, Robin, it was probably a good 8 or 9 years, you know, so Zoweh in 2006, we're coming up on 15 years. But I would say it was almost maybe 8 or 9 years before we started to even formulate redemptive community. What are these tenets? How do we aspire to live? What does redemptive friendship look like? And then therefore, what's redemptive community look like when people are living together with, back to the pillars, nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to fear, living oriented like Jesus, knowing who they are, experiencing who they are, where they are, and the good God's up to in their lives, and pursuing more love, more life, and more freedom. There's a reason why those feel more definitive now, but we did not know those things back in 2006.
Right. Yeah.
We were still learning the craft, while at the same time, what's today? Where
What
are we headed?
gonna unearth today?
What's going?
What
Yeah,
are we-
what's coming?
Yeah.
What's going? And learning as we all do. Wisdom's hard earned. When you really learn something that's deeply true, it usually is costly. It usually makes you move from one organization to another, or makes you leave one theology behind and step into another. I mean, there's always a bit of a leaving and a replacing. And along the way, being able to do that with you, Robin, has been no end or lack of struggle, challenges, victories, celebrations,
Joy.
and bringing friends along the way where, you know this, SJ, it's a bit of a round table at Zoweh, and our team really does an incredible job of following Robin and my lead in many ways. But now we've cut so many keys to people on the team and to other friends and allies. We're just as excited to hear and see what others are discovering and learning and figuring out. The Allies Initiative, what you're doing with resources, SJ, what Sherry does in conferences. You know, Sherry's just so good at helping us be a lot more organized than I ever could.
She would take that as a huge compliment. She loves making things better.
Yeah.
That's
Cole,
she thrives.
Cole and
does.
his graphic designs and his graphic interpretation and imagery, Christopher and what he does on the website, Serena, our podcast engineer, those
Serena
were
and Brooke.
not, 06, none of that stuff was on the list, man.
No. And then the conference team. I mean, you got
Oh.
Jim, Tom, Gary,
David Burnett.
Scott Stankiewicz,
Yep.
all kinds of team members. And it's been interesting being on the journey along with you for about 10 years now, you know, as a participant in the beginning and then joining the team along the way. But, you know, there's guide members that have gone on and are doing
Yeah.
other things now. You
Yeah.
know, I'd love to get Jay Stott in here.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Keith and Jay would be a fun conversation. All
Yeah,
right, Thompson talked about it a little bit. Let's go back and stuff.
I mean, some of those guys that have been on the guide team and then gone on to different things. So,
And it's really funny, SJ, I got to say that the coming and going, I think of Greg Saylors, you know, on our team, and you and Sherry too, it wasn't like we were hiring.
No.
It really, you know, the people
No.
who have joined us have been people we've kind of found in the ditch or they found.
or it's like you said to me, I didn't know you guys were free agents.
Yeah, I didn't know you were, because you guys were working at the church, you were on staff, you'd been to a lot of events, but it's been like that where propositions, invitations, what do you think? You know, well, what's the job description? I don't know.
Yeah, and it
What do
kind
you,
of
my question was for years, well, what do you want to do? What can you bring to the team? What can you do? What do you want to do? So
and it's
that's how it's
interesting
been.
too how God has brought people. I think about a couple of our most recent additions to the circle, Joseph and Lori Mize. You know, they're all the way out in Arkansas and working remotely, which it's not all that uncommon.
We've
now,
all been doing
you know?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, Dana and Jeff,
the rendezvous
are out there in
team.
Charlotte, you know. But when we need someone to focus on marketing and, you know, Joseph and Lori have a heart for marriage. Dana's great with books, you know, and on the women's team. And now Jeff's getting even more involved with the Legacy Council. I mean, God just brings these people along.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like you just wait for God to bring the people along and then what they're going to do is revealed, you know.
And what Greg's doing with the allies, you know, there was a day that it just became all of a sudden, there was these thoughts and plans and prayers. And then all of a sudden it's a reality of an allies initiative with hundreds and hundreds of men who are creating Heart of a Warrior spaces, doing what we're trying to do, create environments for people to connect with God and each other.
Yeah. Where
And so
redemptive communities can grow.
Yeah, exactly. So we're making it up as we go, walking with God as we can, and seeing this thing that started stolen by C.S. Lewis, Zoweh. That's why we're doing what we're doing and learning how to do it as we go. So it's been good.
Yeah.
Really, really, really good.
Well, thank you guys for sharing stories with us today and with the listeners. Listeners, if you are interested in reaching out to us, you have questions for us, or suggestions, anything you want to communicate with us here at Exploring More about, you want to email us at exploringmore@zoweh.org. Yeah, you got it now. Episode.
Close harmony.
Yeah, we're almost at episode 130 something.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Dang.
And 80 some countries, 30.
93 countries.
Dang.
Yeah.
I didn't get the memo.
Yeah,
Wow.
93 countries now.
That's fine.
But yeah, shoot us an email, exploringmore@zoweh.org, and go to zoweh.org. Check out some of the resources that we have available there for you. We've put a lot of stuff up there that's free and otherwise.
And especially, I want them to know SJ's been working on this. It's coming soon. When we release this podcast, it'll probably be something to be seen. But if not, there's some preview stuff to be seen about the Rendezvous Project.
Yeah,
Just
go to the rendezvousproject.com.
the marriage
and check it all
video
out.
series from our Rendezvous weekends that we did live. We've recorded those. Those are going to be available for couples to go through on their own. They can go through them with other couples weekly, or even host their own small couples gathering, a weekend retreat. So
Yep.
cannot
gonna
wait.
be
Can't wait.
awesome.
It's awesome.
It
Yeah.
is
Yep.
going to be awesome.
Yep. Good things take time. So
That's
thanks for
right.
being patient with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for joining us on the Exploring More podcast.
Bye.
We'll see you next time.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.